All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome on back here for another fantastic edition of our Traders Talk Workshop, our live Q&A workshop hosted always in the Cybergroup Trading Room. And of course, I want to welcome all of us joining us today on social media, Facebook Live and YouTube. We typically do this workshop maybe 2 or 3 times across the whole calendar year on our social media streams. So welcome aboard to everybody. For those of you that are unaware of who I am, of course, I mean, who the hell knows who I am, right? My name is Josh Levitan. You know who Fausto Pugliese is, of course. My name is Josh Levitan. I'm the senior instructor here at Cyber Trading University. I typically moderate our live trading room. I conduct 2/3 of our stock trading course here at CTU. For anyone joining us for the first time on social media today, welcome aboard. If you'd like to ask any questions, feel more than free to do so by going right to the chat board on YouTube. You could ask any questions, and as we go through, I'll have the chance to go back and just check the chat board out. But otherwise, I'm going to type my email address in here in the chat board below, josh@ctutrading.com. After this workshop, you could always feel more than free to send over any additional questions, any stocks that you would want to talk about, review with me on the side, right at my email address there, josh@ctutrading.com. All right, so for Larry and Kevin, Grant, Michael, Deb, Phil, Donald, John, the 120 of us today joining us live inside Cybergroup, we have a lot to get to. So let's talk really briefly about this morning in particular and the morning watch list that we ended up putting out, because as we typically do in Traders Talk, we'll have the chance to go over a couple of these stocks in full from A to Z, really break down why we put them on the watch list, what we were looking for in the pre-market on those stocks, and how they ended up playing out, right? I mean, listen, if every stock moved the exact way that we thought it would work out beginning from pre-market, none of us would be here. If trading was that easy, we'd just all be mega millionaires, right? Out on our own private island, right? So unfortunately, that's not the case. But that's to say, at least with preparation should come confidence. If you're very good at identifying where the big volume levels are, and if you're planning ahead of time, then you're not going to be as overwhelmed in the moment. You'll be more prepared, more confident to not like think about the maybes or the potentialities. Oh, what if this stock tanks after I get in? Oh no, in the moment, you can't think about that. It's not as much thinking as it is doing. So, what I mean by that is, based upon jumping into a trade, we can't just kick our feet up and assume the stock's going to run. Again, if trading was that easy, none of us would be here. So, it's to say, as soon as we get into a stock, hey, we have to manage the trade. Where's our line in the sand? Where is our next support level in case if we're wrong? Where should we set our stops to? All it takes is one losing trade to blow it all, right? So here at Cyber Trading University, what I teach, and of course Fausto down the line as well, is more so than anything how to prevent yourself from losing money. And we teach that first prior to you learning how to really make money and know why a stock is running the way it is. All right. How about this on YouTube today? George M joining us. Welcome aboard, George. All right. I will recommend this to my friend for crypto, he says perhaps there. So you know what? We'll talk crypto at the very end. I started this workshop at 11:05, so we'll go a little extra today just to make up for any lost time, and we'll finish up by going over crypto. We have a request on Celo, CELO also. All right, so really quick, let's go right to the morning watch list that we had here today. I'll post it for all of us here live. Now, Fausto put this out, mind you, at 9:15 Eastern time this morning, 9:13 it shows, but ended up putting out relatively a shorter watch list. Notice that there's not 8 or 10, 12 stocks on this list. We were contained at first to HLBZ, the ever so popular Uber, QuantumScape QS, which is a stock that we've traded in the trading room previously, NNVC, a cheapie, and then also another cheapie here, CEI. All right. So just to get something out of the way instantly, because normally the way that I interpret this list here myself is, well, are there any stocks on this list that I do pretty damn well on a week-to-week basis or day-to-day basis? Unfortunately, there's not really any stock here that we trade every day, or maybe CEI, the last one there. So I'll get to that. But then from there, it's to say, well, what looks like the most active? What's making the best move within the pre-market? So I'm actually going to show NNVC here to begin. Well, unfortunately, with this stock, NNVC, as much as we were all interested in seeing how this stock would perform once the market opened up, what, 9:21 Eastern time, folks, this morning, about 8 minutes after Fausto posted the watch list, NNVC got halted. Right now, normally stocks don't get halted in pre-market, but it's to say they don't get halted from volatility. They could still get halted off of news pending. If if an exchange wants to suspend trading entirely, they could do so. So there is at least news pending on this stock, NNVC, and that came out, or the halt came in, I should say, at 9:21 in the morning. It hasn't been open since. So it's just for me to tell you folks, well, I took the time myself to prep this chart up, and I was excited to see how this would open up, but obviously there's been nothing to show since. And maybe later on today, or perhaps even in this workshop, it might reopen up, who knows. But unfortunately, there was just no trade on the stock, right? So outside of NNVC, the stock I do want to talk about here, because the HLBZ, as crazy as that is, and as big of a pop and run as that stock made today, I just know from experience, I'd say probably about 4 to 5% of us live inside Cyber Group were actually watching this and actively trading it. The reason I say that is because most of us are not level 5 traders as we would look to categorize you in our classes. Most of us are not really making that 1,000, 2,000 plus per day. Traders that are, very confident to trade a stock that has a fluctuating spread of anywhere between 15 to 30 cents. That's what this stock was and still is right now. Look at it go on level 3, the matrix here, our level 3 program on the far right. This is impossible to read, right? If you could actively read this order book right now and tell me exactly what's going on, then hey, you're one step ahead of me. But for as crazy as this is, hey, we'll put it on the list. But I know that most of us were not as keen to trade it today. I'm going to start off by going over a stock that a lot of us were keen to trade. Unfortunately, it didn't make as good of a move, the CEI. What I want to do is just skim this over briefly, just to kind of show what happened to this stock upon the market opening up, and what had happened after. But really, I want to dig into one of the other stocks on our list, and that was QuantumScape QS. So that will really be kind of our center of attention at first here. But at first, we'll go over the CEI. So actually, one of our trial members inside Cyber Group today, Jose S, ended up asking, or alluding to the fact that it might be setting itself up for a drop off, a short drop on the CEI trade. He had made mention of that in pre-market. I think it was like perhaps here at the time. And all I told him was, hey, watch the tape, watch the program time and sales, because if we happen to see a lot of selling, a lot of red on the time and sales, then you know what? That leaves me to ask, well, what if history repeats itself after the market opens? So that's practically what happens, right? We ended up seeing big support break on this bar, roughly off of 167, 165, it looks like. And then from there, just steadily dropped off going into the market open. So is it possible for it to pop and run after? Yeah, absolutely. It's possible. But the question is, well, what happens if history repeats itself? What happens after the market opens up, after the first 3 minutes, 5 minutes of this trading? Because we're normally not trading the first 1 to 5 minutes upon the market opening. We're going to see some wackier moves, shakes, and it's going to trap a lot of us oftentimes. And that's exactly what happened here. Like, yeah, it made a small little spike up, but once this came back down and practically, it made the same exact move that it had made in pre-market, where it broke under support at 167. And once it did that, that was it. One little blip where it broke above it but came back down, and at this point you just know it's not as likely to make anywhere near a good move up. So this stock was up about 6-7% in pre-market, and it's only up 2.5% right now, dropped off shortly after the market opened. All right, so that was a brief one to at least go over. Unfortunately, this CEI trade has been more of a tease than anything. But this QS stock, and it's actually still in play live right now as we're talking, but this QS stock was also extremely active leading into the market open. So what I really want to do is go over this trade in full from A to Z for us here. Actually, I'll keep these up for right now, but I'll bring up level 4, I'll bring up the bookmap program, and I'll show you what I was looking for in this trade. So on QuantumScape here in pre-market, well, the stock is moving up pretty nicely at first after 8:30, but after that point, what's the trend of this stock leading into the market open from 8:45 or 9 o'clock Eastern time? going into the market open, well, it's not exactly, going up across the final 30 to 45 minutes here. When that happens, if a stock is not really moving upward leading into the open, then I think that we have a little bit more time to see this stock drop or pull back or at least consolidate. And then maybe, just maybe, it will make its big move later on. That's the first thing that stands out to me here. All right, well, aside from that, where are our levels? Well, it looks like we had a pretty big iceberg order pretty early on in pre-market, right off of $23.40. It goes to show here, actually, by going back on Bookmap, there was about a 25,000 share order on the ask, right at 23.40. For all of us live inside Cybergroup right now, all of our actual students, Larry and Kevin and Deb and Grant and Michael and Phil, let me ask you, on the time and sales program, I'm talking about this program right here where I'm kind of moving this around. This program, time and sales. When we see a big iceberg order on the ask of level 3 get filled, like this big 25,000 share iceberg order at 23.40, what color pops up on time and sales once that order gets filled? Contrary to the selling that we had in red on time and sales for CEI, you would look for green, right? Green on time and sales means active buying volume getting filled. So for every buyer, there's a seller. For every seller, there's a buyer. This creates resistance until it gets filled. The only reason this gets filled is if we have people that are looking to take the shares from the seller, if they actually agree to take them. If they don't, then there's not going to be much of a demand for the price or for this order here, and the stock might just drop from that price, acting as the resistance. But early in pre-market, it filled the order. It even broke above that price again a bit later on. So what if history repeats itself? What if after the market opens up, this stock ends up breaking back over 23.40? Well, I'd like to think, should that happen, which again, it's not entirely guaranteed, the conditional words of maybe or potentially or if come in mind here, because once the market opens up, if this just drops right away, then obviously I'd say it's more of a short than a long, but I'd be looking for a much lower price level to act as support, as a bounce level. So once the market opens up, well, damn, this thing just tanked, right? So it goes to show that you can't exactly look to guarantee a stock to move up once the market opens. And certainly for this stock here, it wasn't really like popping into the open. If anything, it was more like flat, if anything, beginning to trend down off the highs here prior to 9 a.m. So when the market opened up, this thing just completely crapped out. But look what happened a bit later on. And to just quickly summarize this trade, well, there was a much better level that you could have entered from first, and that was actually off of $23. It looks like this ended up providing as a pretty nice bounce level. It took a little while to get the gears going here, but it looks like it broke higher from 23, and from that point, it really took off. Now, on this trade, I'll be very straightforward with you and tell you that right here at this point, I can't tell you that I took this trade. I was watching another stock at the time, and I ended up missing this move. When it broke over 23.40, slammed right over this iceberg at 23.50 and took off. Like, I was pretty frustrated by that. Well, folks, this is where I say we can't just, get too flustered. We can't get too emotional with our trading. We can't just jump into a trade in between levels because we missed it at first. I mean, the way I raised this from yesterday was that hey, most of us here inside Cybergroup are semi-retired to retired. And I had asked the question yesterday in class of, well, hey, how many years were you in the workforce? Like, how many years were you busting your ass, working long days, long hours to have the money that you have in your account to begin with? And everyone was saying, 30 years in the workforce, 40 years in the workforce. Folks, I've been with CTU for 7 years now, right? If I'm so concerned about losing my money and I've been busting my ass here for like 7 years, exactly how concerned should you folks be about losing a ton of money on a trade if you've been working this long and much longer than me, right? So that's where I talk about money management. I can't just jump into this trade because it's just going up. I have to have a legitimate reason. The only reason I would look to buy a stock is if it's directly breaking through a big level on the way up. And unfortunately, I missed my trade here from 23. I missed my trade from 23.40 here when it broke from that price. But that's where I'll tell you, I ended up jumping in this trade a bit later on. It was right from here. It ended up dipping down, and perhaps, I could have gotten in even lower if there was a better level that I could have taken the trade from. But I waited for this to break back over 23.40. Notice how well this held under 23.40. Goes to show it's a pretty damn strong level, right? And that's the exact same price level that we had big buying from pre-market, right? 23.40 right here. So what if history repeats itself? Hey, if this could pull back down, I would need to wait for it to break under 23.40 and then right back above it. It took probably about 5 minutes for it to do so. But right here, when it popped over 23.40, I got filled at 42. Swift trade up. I ended up getting out on the trade. It was right around 23.75 or 23.76. Obviously pushed up a little bit higher. Now, at this point, right before I started a coaching session with one of our students, Alan, you know what? I told myself this. The only reason I'm going to buy a stock is if it directly breaks through a very big level that I prepped for on the way up. But to even be more broad and general than that, I'm not going to buy a stock if I'm not led to believe that it's going to move up to a higher price in a very short amount of time. Simply put, right? Like that's the only main reason I would ever buy a stock, right? If I'm led to believe it's going to be at a higher price, in a very short time upon me getting in. So that's where I say right over here, you know what? I took the risk. I waited for this to break under 23.50, maybe even 23.40. Unfortunately, it dropped down to the VWAP here and, it pushed back over 23.50 and I ended up jumping back in this trade. I got in right from 23.53 and I was in for just about like 25 cents again and let some money get off the table there. And I got out before it ended up, dropping off a bit further here. I got somewhere out right around 23.70, 23.72. Every trade begins with the entry point. So upon me getting in here, I'm extremely hopeful that by, maybe 11 o'clock, by the time we start Traders Talk, that this could have been breaking over 24. But you know what? After I got in and realized, there's a nasty shake and a pop, hey, maybe it could fly. Unfortunately, it pulled back, and I'm thinking here at this point where my cursor is, this is kind of a lower high from the real peak. If it ends up dipping back down here, this might begin to slump off. So I was hopeful upon me getting in for this to be a 50-cent winner, if not a lot more. But once you realize the lower highs are kicking in and the stock is failing to move up higher, it's a very basic line I'm about to bring to all of us here today. And, if you're joining us on social media for the first time, it might seem extremely basic and just a very simple line where, oh, I knew that already. Well, if a stock is not breaking higher, there's only one other way the stock's going to go. The chart goes from left to right. The stock goes up and down. That's all there is to it. So if this stock is not going to break out higher right here and pop back up and run up to 24, and if it ends up dropping back down and just failing to break higher, folks, you got to learn to fold them. You got to learn to take the profit. So are there points on this trade where I could have held on longer or where I could have taken a better profit? Perhaps. I mean, not only perhaps, the answer is yes. But I was pretty content taking the 20 or 22 cents here because I had a pretty sweet entry. So that's where I say, you know what? It's all right if it didn't go up to 24 and make the big grand move I was hoping for it to make. Upon me getting in, I set my stop and it led to a quick 20 to 25-cent profit on 1,000 shares, $250. That's fun. All right, but look what's happening right now live. And normally here in Traders Talk, we really do not do live market scenarios because that's what we kind of go over in class, right? Next week is phase 2, where I'll be more in the live market myself. And then the week after is really our advanced class with Fausto Pugliese trading the live market. But you know what? If this stock is going to begin to perk back up and perhaps break over 23.40 again, that pre-market level that we had, and more so if it breaks over 23.50, Well, right here, if we keep seeing more buying off of 2350, then I'd easily be led to believe that this stock later on today will have a run and test up towards 24. So we'll check back in on this QuantumScape trade coming up in just a few minutes, but seeing this break over 2350 is encouraging, at least for the short-term future for this stock. Not the immediate future. This still might shake around, but this is a clue. This is a sign. Seeing this break over 2350, well, hey, on time and sales, that's more green on the tape, right? By the time this breaks 2350, that's more green, more green. If we keep seeing more green off that price, then over time, I'd be led to believe it's going to make that run. All right. So we covered, unfortunately, NNVC. That was like really a non-discussion because it got halted 8 minutes prior to the market opening up. On the CEI trade, unfortunately, history repeated itself, and we ended up seeing the sell-off, as the market opened up, and that did not lead to any sort of run. That led to a big drop. Well, the QS, like we had said before, led to a good move. There's one other stock I do just want to cover myself, and then from there we'll dip right into the email inbox that I have and go over any questions that you folks had sent over. But this stock here, CRVS, this was not on our morning watch list here today, folks. This was really the only other stock I was more interested in personally. The reason I say that is because CRVS made a huge run going back into Friday and Friday afternoon. It closed extremely strongly. And hey, it ended up actually popping and breaking higher yesterday going into the afternoon, right? So based off of yesterday's activity, albeit it wasn't on the main special watch list that we put out, if you did well on this stock yesterday, if you did really well on this stock back on Friday last week, I would like to think you'd be more inclined to follow this stock going into the market open. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So on this trade, I'll bring Bookmap up in just a moment, but clearly you could see, much like the QS trade, I ended up prepping this chart, going into the open. I have a lot of lines here. 550 in blue, 6 here in blue. This yellow line, conveniently enough, this was actually the very high of the day today. Why is this line so strong? So I'll cover that with you folks here coming up right now. So on CRVS right away, this is where I say I was interested in this stock going into the open, but I was more interested in QS just based off the activity. Like if I ask, what's the trend of this stock going into the market open, there's not really a trend. It's like kind of, trading within a range. It's holding over a support level here, right around 549 of all prices, 549 to be exact as support. 48, I'm sorry, 548, acting as a potential support. But otherwise, there's not like really a respective trend on this stock right before the open. All right, well, it looks like here's a resistance level at 6, a bigger order on the ask at least there. Bigger order on the bid at 5 or 501, whole number at 5 you would respect. And I put a line there. Let's go back to yesterday's book map. This is the book map from yesterday on the CRVS stock. So it looks like, at least on CRVS, we ended up seeing the opening bell print yesterday, this big green dot on Bookmap. This represents 149, 150, basically 1,000 share print that was filled right at 498. That was the opening print price yesterday. We had our closing bell print yesterday. That was right around, if that's not a coincidence, I don't know what would be. That closing bell print is exactly at $6.17, mind you. So I'll tell you, if you are following this CRVS stock going into the market open, then what you need to do is go back to yesterday's data, yesterday's chart, and it's to say, well, where were the bigger levels? And it's not just looking at the iceberg orders, the dark orange or red lines going horizontally on Bookmap, that is, but it's also looking for the bigger spikes of volume and more so where we had bigger singular transactions on the tape. So it's to say that at the market open at 9:30, at the market close at 4 p.m. Eastern time, we're going to see some big transactions on the tape. The bigger the print, the more meaningful the price level should be. So right now, as we're talking, well, there's our breakout. This thing's popping up even much higher right now. But it's to say that why was this price level such a big resistance? Why was this the top today? It's because right at the market close, we had a pretty big transaction, a 40,000 share print that was filled on the tape. That's like asking, what if there's a 40,000 share iceberg order here on level 3? Would you not respect that? I would. So, that's why I kind of draw these lines here on the chart right before the market opens, because it gives me much greater confidence with identifying what could potentially be a very strong level after the open, that is. All right. So really quick, just going back on CRVS here, at least CRVS unfortunately pulled back down, but again, though, it's a clue. That was a potential clue for what could be ahead later on today. On the QS trade, it ended up failing to break higher. It pulled back, broke under 2350. If we keep seeing this perk back up and breaking above 2350 here, then I'd like to think it's only a matter of time. So I was kind of forewarning us here that this might be right place, wrong time. But either way, this is easily a clue for what's to come ahead. And on CRVS, you can now easily say the same thing, because when a stock breaks through a very, very big price level, then I'd like to imagine we're going to get a very big move shortly after. So it's just to say, notice this was not an iceberg level per se. There was not an orange line on CRVS at $6.17. There was not. But folks, that doesn't mean that it's not a level. I mean, again, that 617 acted as the very tippy high of the day simply because that was where we had the closing bell print from yesterday. So that's where I say in pre-market, from 8:30 going into the market open, unless if you're of course trading, you should be lining up your charts, prepping. Where are the big iceberg orders? Where were the big prints on the time and sales program? The reason I'm harping on 2350 so much here on QS, I mean, certainly it was an iceberg level once the market opened, like for example, this dark orange line at 2350. So that creates a huge level at 2350 already, right? An 82,000 share iceberg order. So clearly that's an iceberg level. But the reason I was also harping on 2350 for this trade is because right at the market open, well, this is even much bigger than just the 82,000 there at 2350, but right at $23.47 at the market open, the quote unquote opening bell print, as I like to call it, it's a 365,000 share transaction. I'm going to break out the old calculator here, because as good as I may seem to be, I don't know this math off the top of my head, folks. I'm going to do 365,688 times $23.47. And that tells you that this transaction is as valuable as $8.5 million. Pretty damn big, right? Now, that's not one person. This here is not one person. This is a conglomerate of transactions that were set to be filled at whatever the market open price was. So that came out shortly after the open, and it was priced at $23.47. All right. So let me know if you folks have any questions on this trade. I think that you know what's happening right now, right? So let me know if you have any additional questions on this QS trade now that it's clearly running from 2350. I think that we're going to get our test of 24 in due time. All right. So here, I want to go to a question that tied in really well with basically all that I've been covering so far since we started Traders Talk. This comes in from Patrick, one of our students inside Cyber Group. He was just simply asking, what do you look for in pre-market to determine what stock you think will most likely go in the direction that you predict? Is it the smart money prints? Is it heavy buying / selling from retail traders at certain levels? So my umbrella comment is everything that I had covered there answers Patrick's question. But to go a step further into it, right? Because he's more asking what stock or what do I look for in pre-market to determine what stock I think will most likely go in the direction I predict. So, at least for what I scan for in pre-market, I could only chart or prep and line up so many of these stocks, folks. Like I can't do it for, 10 or 12 or 20 stocks. I don't have enough time. And that's me speaking because I always say this in a great way. I offer this up to every one of us live inside Cyber Group, and I will right now again. I highly encourage you folks to private chat me at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Hey, if you're looking to wonder what I'm watching right before the market opens, I have a list of about 6 or 8 students that do this on a day-to-day basis. If you message me at 9:20 Eastern or after, I can't guarantee a response because I'm going to be already locked in on my own trading. But hey, if you message me at like 8:50 in the morning, 9 o'clock Eastern, maybe a couple minutes after that, I have more than enough time myself to chat to you and say, hey, here's the stocks that I'm looking at. But what I'm telling you is that even with that, I can only prep up so much, right? So I know that. I only try and line or prep up maybe 3 or 4 stocks at most going into the market open. So let's say for this morning, right? This morning in particular, I only lined up 4 stocks this morning. I lined up the NNVC, which unfortunately we know is halted. The QS trade. I ended up lining up the it was QS, CRVS, NNVC, and SDC. So CRVS, you can clearly see I ended up charting, lining up, and look at this run right now. There you go. And then the other one I ended up charting and lining up was Smile Direct Club. Those were the 4. I didn't chart or line up Uber. I didn't chart or line up HLBZ. And you can see on CEI, I was interested in that stock, but personally, that stock has been more of a tease than a consistent runner. So thankfully, I made the right call with not charting this stock. But it's to say though that you can't try and follow 8 or 10 or 12 stocks right at 9:30. You're going to overwhelm yourself. You're going to drown yourself with too many stocks that you're watching. So I know that with the 4 that I charted and lined up with SDC, with CRVS. I mean, hell, obviously news came out on QS, and with that up as much as it was in pre-market, you knew this was going to create some sort of opportunity for us today. Maybe a short if it drops off, maybe a big long opportunity if it's the right time, right? So why try and overwhelm yourself? Not try, but even like why try and follow 6, 8, 10, 12 stocks right at 9:30? You know that this is going to be volatile enough for you. You know that you're going to be more than occupied with your time trying to follow this stock. I know that. If I know that, then you should know that, right? Like I say that to myself. I have to yank my own leash at times and say, Josh, calm down. You can't be following too many stocks here right now. So to give a long story short for Patrick here, who had asked, what do I look for in pre-market to determine what stock I think will most likely go in the direction I predict? That answer really should be plural. What stocks? So I try and line up 3 to 4 stocks at most. And then from there, out of those 3 or 4, well, I'm asking myself, what's the trend of this stock leading into the market open? If the trend is completely down, then I'll tell you, I think that we have a little time to prep and see this stock either consolidate, or if it ends up completely diving off, then we know what's going to happen after. Like, unfortunately, BKYI, I called out in pre-market right at 8 o'clock, made a great move. It was one of the first stocks I wrote down on my notepad. I told myself at 8:15, I said, this should be an automatic pick. I'm very likely to, prep and line up this chart. But afterwards at 9 o'clock, I see it like breaking back down here. I'm like, wow, we have a lot of selling on this trade. It basically dumped all the way back down. So I'm not going to follow this stock at 9:30. It's not really is going to, it's more often than not going to be worth my time. Looks like it made for a small bounce. So could there have actually been a trade to take on this? Perhaps. But that's where I ask myself, well, what's the direction of this stock leading into the market open from 8:30 or 9 o'clock leading into 9:30, the final 30, 45 minutes or hour prior to the market opening up? What is the trend? Because at that point, if the trend is clearly down, well, it's down because we're seeing more selling. Stocks go up because we see buying, stocks go down because we see selling, folks. So after the market opens up, the question is, what if history repeats itself? What if after the market opens up, this stock continues to show more selling as it's, testing a support, breaking below it? More often than not, it's going to lead to a continued drop off. All right. So, I don't just stick on one. I try and prep for about three or four. And at that point, it's just to say I'm not perfect on my I'm very good at my lining up, but I'm not perfect with the sequence in which I go from stock to stock to stock. Like for instance, for the three or four stocks I prep and chart, what if I turn over to a stock a fraction of a second after it makes a big move? I might just be there maybe a fraction of a second afterwards and it runs without me. So, I'm just a human like everyone else is here, right? So, as much as I try not to overwhelm myself, there are still times where I'm just straight up there at the wrong time. The stock already took off without me. So, I either have to try and react to it and wait for the stock to, make a move to a level that I want to take the trade from, or I got to drop the ego and say, you know what? There's plenty of other fish out there in the sea for me to catch, plenty of other opportunities. So, you know what? If I miss a move on a stock that I prepped and lined up, then I'll jump to the other three that I prepped and lined up for and see if there's a trade to take from any of the levels that I charted. Keep in mind, folks, if you prep your charts up at 8:30, 9 o'clock, you you have to be pretty good at identifying where the big levels are. But if you are, I mean, clearly there's a reason why you put a line there. So you have to have confidence within yourself and your own decision making in order to just jump in a trade. All right, going back to QS here, this thing pulled back down briefly. It's not fully ridden off yet. It doesn't mean that it's going to fully tank. I mean, hey, if it holds from where it's at right here, or it just holds over 2350 and then spikes right back up, then that's going to lead to more buying, and that can lead to the run up to 24. All right. Question from Matthias, one of our trial members joining us here for this week. Do you look for iceberg orders as you prep for the stock? Of course. And that's what we were talking about just before. Like on QS, right? On this QS trade. And I'm just showing this from Bookmap's perspective because unfortunately we can't rewind back on the pre market on our platforms. But here at $23.40, this is pre market. This is an iceberg order, Matthias. It was on level 3. It was on the order book. Obviously, Bookmap shows it, on their heat map with a dark red line. But with that in mind, this right here is a massive order for this stock to break through. A 25 plus thousand share order on the ask that was sitting there at 23.40. So that's exactly why I have this line here at 23.40. That was a key level from earlier. And now at this point, if this stock really wants to run, it can't make lower highs, lower lows. So, really, this is kind of a do or die situation, I feel like, on this QS stock right from this point here. But even, as we even analyze this trade from this point forward, well, our next major resistance is an iceberg order. There is an iceberg order on the order book. It's a 52.6 thousand share order that's sitting right there at 24. So not only is the answer yes, I look for iceberg orders as I prep for any stock, but the answer is always yes. I'm always looking for iceberg orders on the order book in order for us to identify potential targets or potential support or resistance levels at least. Without Bookmap, you could easily look for iceberg orders by reading the TradeStation matrix on the right side of my platform here. Or if you don't have TradeStation and if you don't have a broker platform that offers this type of program at least, then I would strongly recommend for you to go right to the NASDAQ website. That's data.nasdaq.com. Their product is the NASDAQ Book Viewer. It's an order book that's very similar to this program here, the Matrix, but it just shows the NASDAQ order book in full. So that's a great tool if you don't have any program on your platform for that or Bookmap entirely. All right, so we keep it going down through the email inbox that I have here. And again, for all of us on social media today joining us, I appreciate you sticking with me here during this workshop. We try and do this maybe 2 or 3 times across the calendar year on YouTube. But if you're interested in joining us live inside our trading room, I'll just get this out the way now. You can go right down to this link on the banner below to continue the commentary that we have inside our live trading room. But otherwise, though, if you have any questions that you would like to ask me outside of this workshop, you could do so by going right to my email address. Send an email right to josh@c2trading.com. Once again, my name is Josh Levitan. I'm the senior instructor here with Fausto at Cyber Trading University. So, hey, after this workshop, live workshop, you could always continue our conversation and just ask me any questions via email. All right. So with our conversation on iceberg orders, I mean, I probably had answered this just through discussion, but I want to ask a question that Dave S had emailed me earlier this morning. So he was asking in the trading room when a quote unquote IB order, meaning iceberg order, is being called out, how do I distinguish whether it's a buy or a sell to know if it represents support or if it represents resistance. So I'll tell you, I know I answered this question just before, at least our last example. It's to say this, right, and to hammer the point home. This stock right now is trading currently around or at 2363, 2364, right? If there is an iceberg order and if it's on the ask of level 3, like here on this program, the matrix, if it's on the right side here under ask, that would create a resistance. If there is an iceberg order and it's on the bid side here, let's say in blue where it says bid, well, that would create a potential support. The key word in that sentence is not support or resistance, it's the word potential. It's not guaranteed support or resistance, it's potential support or resistance. So it's to say that currently live right now, we don't really see an iceberg here on either side. Like right now, live, there is no clear iceberg order on the bid or no iceberg order showing on the ask, at least until 24. That means that this stock is like more in a point of indecision, a point where it's kind of trading in a smaller range. Perhaps 2350 could still be support, but it's just right now there's no iceberg order acting as that support level right now. So here in this case, we need to make sure that we have at least a support level. If it's not from level 3, then it's at least from past history. Like these lines are still going to create support. But otherwise, that's where I showed on Bookmap at least, this dark red line at $24. Well, this will represent the iceberg order that's currently out there. It's a 52,000 share order, and since it's on the ask, and it's just simply above where this stock is trading. That's where I say that that is resistance for right now. That's our major top. That's our major resistance level. Now, when an iceberg order gets filled, and this will confuse a couple of us, perhaps not Dave S. who would ask this question, perhaps just one or two of us. And if it does, please, this is what we talk about all throughout the phase 1 and 2 classes when it comes down to our discussion on the time and sales program. But it's what we had covered just before for all of our students that said green. Well, when an iceberg order on the ask gets filled, that's where we see green on the time and sales program. Well, green on the time and sales program indicates that the order on the ask got filled. Well, no order on the ask is going to get filled unless if there's enough demand for that price. So that's where I say if no one buys the 53,000 shares that they're trying to sell at 24, well, simply put, that order doesn't get filled. It acts as a top, and we're not going to see any sort of green on the time and sales at that price. So it's to say at least that when we see a big iceberg order on the ask get wiped out and taken out, well, that's actually what we would call active buying at the time. Like again, here on QS, that's where I said, well, if this breaks back over 2350, and if we keep seeing more green on the time and sales off of 2350, that's where I was led to believe for the stock to run up. And so far, it's still doing a pretty good job at that. Now, for every time that an iceberg order on the ask gets wiped out and filled and taken out, does that guarantee that the stock is going to perfectly run up to the next level? No. I mean, nothing in trading is guaranteed, folks. You'd like to think that if a stock breaks above a major iceberg, that it has a much greater chance to do that. And that is the case. But obviously, if you look here, when this ends up breaking over the iceberg order that was there at 24, there was an 85 plus thousand share order that was sitting there. Well, once that order got filled, we saw a ton of green on the time and sales program right here. Well, clearly, after it broke over that order, it didn't last too long above 24. So that's where I say my best entries to buy a stock are directly or immediately after it breaks through a big level on the way up. Well, this is exactly that. It breaks through a big level on the way up. Can I ask a question, folks? And be truthful with this, if so, because that would be the best way to review this setup here. Did anybody here in Cyber Group, for the 120 of us joining us in our live trading room, did anyone end up jumping into this stock right after it broke over 24 here? Donald says no. All right. If anybody did, just let me know. You don't need to tell me how you performed on the trade if you'd rather not say that, of course, right? But I'll tell you, if you bought this stock right after it broke over 24, you had the right line of thinking with the entry, right? Now, the next sentence that I'll say will kind of sharpen up what you should do right after you get in because, well, my best entries to buy a stock are directly after they break through a level going up, a big level going up. Well, this is a big level. Well, shortly after a stock breaks through a big level on the way up, we should see a pretty big move. Very shortly after a stock breaks through a big level on the way up, very shortly after, we should see a pretty big move. All right. So if it breaks over 24 and we go long, what I mean by that is, what if that big move isn't up? Well, I'll be the first to tell you, it's going to make a big move, all right. Big move down. So it's easy for me to tell you, but upon getting into this trade, you absolutely have to set your stop. Like if you don't set your stop here, that's where you turn, a potentially great entry into a nightmare of a trade. So, hey, I didn't take this myself, but if I did, I'd say that was worth the entry. It was potentially worth getting in. But you know what? If it doesn't make the move that we hope for it to make, we don't control this stock, folks, but don't let the stock control you. So, like Michael said in the chat board, he took it, but he got stopped out. All right. It stinks taking any loss, right? Like if this was on 1,000 shares and you get stopped out at 23.85, it's a $150 loss. Like that's not fun taking a $150 loss. But you know what? What if this stock broke back over 24, like right here? Well, with more buying off that big level, I'd like to think that we'd eventually see a massive run back up to make a new run, perhaps even up to the next iceberg. So perhaps this could have been right place, wrong time. That's all. Well, obviously it was because it held under 24 near flawlessly after, actually like exactly flawlessly, and came back down. All right. Now, it's to say though that the more and more buying that we have off of 24, eventually I'd be led to believe we'll get our real run. Just so you folks know, because we're going to finish up Traders Talk in about 10 or 12 minutes from right now. So if you're joining us today on social media, and if you're not going to be joining us in our live trading room afterwards, folks, do not jump into this trade the first time that it re-breaks above this line here. Should this stock go back up to 24, the first time that it tests it, and if it eventually breaks it the first time, I would anticipate the same type of false breakout that you had here. because it's been a damn long time since it even tested that level. I mean, it tested 24 right around 10:15 Eastern time. It's currently 11:54 Eastern time. That's a long amount of time in this trading world that we live in. So that leaves me to tell you that given how far this stock had bounced back up from right around 22.90ish to see it make a move all the way back up to 24, I would be more hesitant to anticipate a false breakout at first, and then maybe the next time that it shimmies back up to 24, that it will make the real run. Exactly like what happened here at 23.50, right? Notice it broke 23.50. It didn't run right away. There was a shimmy. It shook around at first, and when it re-broke right here, that's where it made its move. All right. I want to just keep going through my inbox here for right now. I got a couple of emails that I know I won't have the chance to get to, so I apologize in advance for that. But I want to answer Bob's question. I want to jump into crypto extremely briefly. I say that just because there was a question on one of the cryptos that we were talking about, so we'll do a little review on that. But from Bob, he was asking, Bob W, one of our longtime students inside Cyber Group, he was asking, you seem to be watching so many stocks. What does your setup look like? So, Bob, I show my setup in class. I actually showed it just yesterday in the phase one stock course. We are talking about setting up your computer and platform. So I have 4 monitors that I trade off of, right? I have one monitor that I use specifically for Bookmap. I have one monitor that I use as my main trading platform. I have one monitor set up for Benzinga Pro. And then last monitor I have is kind of a combination between just like miscellaneous, if it's like my emails, or another internet tab, if it's like for Binance for cryptocurrency, or it might be a multi-stock template. I might have just a template that I have with like 4 charts, a chart for each stock. This is where I jump back. And of course, Bob had asked this question at like 9 o'clock in the morning. So, much earlier prior to me kind of screaming to you folks, don't try and follow so many stocks at the same time, right? So, again, to reiterate that, even if Fausto puts out a watch list that has 8 or 10 stocks, that does not mean that you need to be following 8 or 10 stocks. So part of my scanning in the morning is like kind of off of Bookmap. One thing I will mention is that on my Bookmap monitor here, well, I'll quickly kind of just go from tab to tab. And these are all just different stocks that I have populated on my Bookmap. So that gives me at least, a quicker ability perhaps to just kind of skim through. Oh, look at RWLK, breaking higher right now. So like things like that. Like I'll kind of just, go through this book map, at least for the stocks that I have up in advance, right? So that's one thought. But otherwise, it's based off of just constant scanning the market. Benzinga Pro has a really excellent signals page that I use at times to identify stocks that are breaking the highs of the day or lows of the day. So right now, as we turn over to Benzinga Pro Live here, this is the signals page. These are all stocks that are real-time breaking highs of the day. So there is one stock that stands out to us right now, folks, right? CRVS. The second it broke back over 6, and of course 617, that level, man, that was it. This thing's a monster. All right. I can try and give a better detailed answer, but really the time that I use in class would be the best time for me to kind of answer. Meaning that, in the phase two stock course, we have specific classes. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, coming up next week, Bob, we're actually doing that exact class, preparing to trade the market open. It's a 2-part series that I'll be teaching next week in the phase two stock course, but that will really kind of hammer that point home of how I prep to trade the market open, how I kind of maneuver around my trading system once the market does open up, and so forth. All right. From Matthias, if you spot an iceberg order on the bid acting as support, do you need to look at the ask column to see if there is a big order for a sell, meaning as if there's a resistance? So to answer that question, Matthias, let's use CRVS as just a quick example. So in this case, right, like I'm going to flip your question around to kind of tailor it towards this trade. But what if there's an order on the ask? What if there's an iceberg sell order? Do I need to look at the bid column to see if there's a big order to buy at the specific level, at the specified level? So what Matthias is basically asking inversely here is, if there's an iceberg order acting as resistance and the stock is moving up towards it, do you need to have an iceberg order on the bid right around where the stock is trading at? And that answer is going to be no. And much more often than not, you do not see that. If there is, like, for instance, like, if there's a massive 68,000 share iceberg all of a sudden that pops up here, well, God bless. That's even sweeter. That's like eh, that's like the icing on the cake, right? So that's where I'll just say, when we see orders getting filled, well, that's why we need to read the tape, because no stock is going to move up without there being orders on the ask that are getting taken out. Meaning that there's not going to be any sort of movement upward without there being icebergs on the ask getting wiped out by people that are looking just to take the shares from them. There's not going to be any sort of move up without seeing any sort of, bigger order getting filled and without there seeing a ton of green on the tape. So that's what I primarily watch out for when it comes to following the momentum of a stock. So it's to say that at least, as this stock was moving up, there was clearly an iceberg resistance at 7. It ended up holding under it pretty nicely. And then from there, shortly after, it seems like the stock is just so strong, it popped right over that price and continued running. All right. So lastly here, and actually got one of us on YouTube asking, and also I had the email come in from one of our students, John, and he was asking about it too. So he was asking about the crypto CELO. He said today you would go over CELO. It was up 15% last night, on its way to $2,000 by January 2nd, 2024. Now, that's John's guess, his prediction. Very bullish, and that might seem out of the realm of possibility for a lot of us there. But I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility. But let me just pull up this one crypto at first, at least for John. George on YouTube right now, if you're joining us, George, is there one that you would want us to go over? Because every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do the full in-depth review of the positions that we've been tracking, obviously Bitcoin, but also Cardano. So those are the two that we're most heavily invested in. But if there's one that you would want us to look at before we finish up, definitely let me know. I'm going to answer John's question here on CELO just to provide a quick analysis on that. All right. So let's see here. I like to look at a few charts. I mean, to each their own, but the way I've been kind of going through crypto over the last year and a half at this point is I like to have a few charts that I like to toggle back and forth on. The hourly, I like to use a 6-hour chart. I like to use a daily, weekly, monthly. So I don't really keep as in tune with like a 1 minute, 5, 15-minute chart, because there's too much that goes on. I'm not day trading crypto, folks. I'm investing in it. And, I guess you can kind of say swing trading it, but really it's more just kind of holding on and accumulating just throughout. So on CELO, we left off on Celo kind of here because one of our students, John, who had actually emailed me this morning to go over it, he was talking about it the few days before this whole pop happened. So we actually made mention of it when it was around like $4 for 40-ish. And then we had this massive spike where it popped all the way up towards like $10.50, $11 per coin. And it pulled back down. So seems like there was just a lot of chop and movement around since. And over the last, few hours, last day and a half, really, the stock ended up making a pretty nice move back up, right? So let's take a look here, because I don't know if these are all-time highs. I assume for it to be. This is a daily chart here. So on the daily chart, let me pull up what we got here. There's that, that. No, the 500 is not activated yet. But it's to say at least that the 100 EMA, the 200 EMA, it looks like there was a small cross before this spike up. Listen, I mean, right now it's kind of right back to where we had resistance dating back to last year, where it ended up topping off right around 650-ish, maybe 7 here. 725. What's this high from today? 753. So it spiked up to break that high and came back down. I mean, right now it might be still in a point of consolidation. You still might look to see this consolidate and then pop up higher. But otherwise, I mean, hey, it wouldn't shock me if it continues to just spike up over time as it did here. The chart that I'd be more interested in viewing is not just the sello to USD, but for anyone tracking crypto, you really want to follow the charts that are correlating your coin to Bitcoin, like CELO to Bitcoin chart itself. So in comparison to Bitcoin, I mean, obviously it showed on the USD chart, but CELO ended up making a pretty nice spike over the last day and a half in comparison to Bitcoin. So to me, if Bitcoin has continued to run up over the next 3 to 4 months, then perhaps we'll happen to see this either begin to drop back down if Bitcoin's going to run up sharper, or if this decides to run up sharper in relation to Bitcoin, then we'll see it continue to pop. If it breaks the all-time high here, then that's obviously a very, very bullish sign on the CELO. If you're looking for a potential support level, if you're looking at the sello to Bitcoin chart, there is one that I happen to see, and that I'll chart for us here. It's kind of in relation to the past highs that it had, but notice right here, it looks like it was making a top, made the same top here. So perhaps if this wants to hold as a support level, it'll come down, consolidate around this price over time, not drop too far off from it, but then eventually spike back up and run. All right. Question from George. He's asking, can you please look at crypto using Bookmap? Unfortunately, George, we are running extremely thin on time. I'd love to, but I got a schedule to kind of coordinate with. I got coaching sessions with students all throughout the day, actually running about 5 minutes late. I told my student I'd be joining late right now, but it's to say that if I had time earlier to load it up, I would. Perhaps next time I could do that. I know that with crypto, or I know that with Bookmap, you can track crypto on it. It's very useful. Very useful for iceberg orders, right? Now, George on YouTube is just saying very briefly before we finish up, it was before that last comment, but can you check out Ethereum? And that I will do. So, with the drop off in Bitcoin that we had over the last day and a half, I mean, although sello was looking really strong in comparison to it, everything else ended up kind of dropping off pretty sharply. Ethereum, it was one of those two, of course. So, looks like Ethereum is beginning to pull back. This is on a 6-hour chart. Which of course I find pretty useful. So it's to say that Ethereum ended up pulling back towards the 500 EMA that I have on the 6-hour graph. Essentially, ended up holding it perfectly and spiked back up. Just in the midst of the last couple of days. So that's a pretty encouraging sign. Ethereum to Bitcoin. Let's take a look. So I already charted this. This I ended up going over briefly back from Friday last week. But yeah, I mean, for right now, Ethereum compared to Bitcoin still kind of shaking around. This is the 200 EMA on the 6-hour graph here. Perhaps it'll hold this support. If it doesn't, perhaps this horizontal line that I charted, if not that, in correlation with the 500 EMA here, this could be the next big support otherwise. All right. Cardano, one thing I'll mention, because I showed this yesterday, and again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'll do this more than anything. But Cardano, I charted this and I showed this to you folks just, less than 24 hours ago. With the Cardano summit coming up at the end of this week, I was expecting a bounce here, and I loaded up more into Cardano over the last 24 hours. So nice little bounce on the Cardano to Bitcoin chart that we have. That's all. All right, so folks, whoa, how about this to wrap it up as I was flapping my gums for the last 3 minutes. Uh-oh, some big news coming up, folks. Patrick wrote, NNVC reopened. Holy smokes. All right. So before we finish up, we'll quickly show NNVC. Obviously got halted again. So the stock currently is halted once again. Now this time it's halted from volatility, meaning that, it moved down and up too fast to the point where it got halted. Well, it looks like this stock ended up breaking under and then right back over two lines that I had here, 485 and 490. I can't say that I would have predicted that by any means, but with this stock getting halted on the way up now, I'd like to think this is a pretty good chance to see this continue to go up across this day. So for right now, what we'll do is try and look for any big iceberg orders on this stock. It looked like there was an order when this reopened up at 550. There was an order on the ask at like 588, maybe 590, that is. Otherwise, there was an order at 6. So for right now, let's see, do I have this set up? I'm going to draw a line at 588 for right now. You can see that I prepped up the NNVC chart like I told you I did. I drew 6 as a resistance level in advance. 588 in particular, that seemed to have been a complementary iceberg level here that could back 6 up. So we'll see what happens. Also, when this reopened up, folks, look at this big dot on Bookmap. That's a 213,000 share transaction. So again, that's like asking, well, what if there's a 213,000 share iceberg order that pops up? You'd have to respect that, right? Well, that's what I'm saying here. So outside of the orange lines that are showing, those are icebergs. Well, this was an actual transaction that popped up when this had reopened up from its halt. So out of all of these lines that I have here, I'm going to draw one more. We're going to finish up, and then we'll check back in with this stock during the afternoon meeting. So, hey, for all of us on YouTube today joining this special workshop, I appreciate you folks joining. Again, once more, if you'd like to continue the conversation, you could easily do so by going right down to the link on the banner below, signing yourself up for a week-long trial inside our live trading room. Otherwise, I'll catch back with you folks later on this afternoon. I'll be doing the afternoon meeting as always, and we'll check back in with this NNVC stock, and we're going to see what happens, in particular at 523. Is this stock going to reopen here, shake back down under and over 523 and run? Or is it going to keep going and popping back up from this point? We'll find out. We'll see what happens here coming up very shortly, folks. But I appreciate everyone sticking with me here throughout Traders Talk today. For all of us in social media, thank you once again. For all of us live inside Cyber Group, as always, I appreciate you sticking with me. And thank you, folks. For right now, we're going to jump off the microphone in Cyber Group. As I had said, I'll be back on at 2:30 in the afternoon. We'll keep the chat going, obviously. If there's anything else that makes a big move from this point forward, our focus will of course, be on NNVC. If there's anything that we see, we'll say something. But aside from that, folks, I'll be back on later today. I'll talk to you all soon. Take care.